All right, welcome to the Latest.com show. I'm Igor Darras, joining us from Canada, where we're all run off to when President Trump comes to power. He's a Latest.com staff writer and a contributor at IssueHawk from Toronto, Eric Carrier. And he's a military vet and Latest.com senior political analyst from Pittsburgh, Josh Patton. And he's a 24-year veteran of the U.S. State Department and the author of We Meant Well from New York, Peter Van Buren. Well, last night, voters in 12 states went to the polls, and the consensus results seemed to be Trump. Clinton won 7 states, Trump won 7 states, Bernie won 4, Cruz won 3, Rubio won 1. Peter, what was your biggest takeaway from the mess of a result that even had Republicans scratching their heads about what to do for the future?
Well, it's happened. Something that has been speculated on for a long time, and that is Trump is a real candidate. I mean, there's no way to deny it, to twist it around, to play games with it. He is the presumptive Republican nominee at this point, and a very strong one. The same thing on the Democratic side, perhaps less unexpected, but the burst of energy that was Bernie Sanders at one point does not seem to extend to a 50-state strategy. Perhaps we can talk later about the bizarro world where African Americans are flocking to Hillary Clinton. But that does seem to be a significant part of her polarity, and what is.
Josh, any big surprises last night?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise that we're bearing is that Marco Rubio actually won a fucking state. I mean, good for you, pal. I mean, because again, he's had this whole strategy of like, I'm the guy who is not Trump, and I'm not. And I mean, months ago, I was saying I think Rubio would have been their best shot to secure the nomination. And on paper, that makes sense. But up until now, until Minnesota, which is a unique state because Trump he came in third. That's the first time that's happened. I think it's
a little different.
It is a little different, but, until they realize caucuses are stupid, they still count, and it's still notable. Now, does this mean that the nail is in the coffin for Rubio's candidacy? I don't know. I think Florida and actually, the primaries on March 15th are going to be a big deal for him. But I do think the others like Kasich and Carson, who appears to have all but dropped out, it's pretty much over for them. And, while Trump isn't a sure thing yet, the likelihood of him being the nominee is very, very high.
Eric, most of the races went according to the polls last night. Was there anything that popped out at you?
No, I mean, it's pretty much as was estimated. Trump came out, won enough states to look like the candidate for the Republicans. Cruz barely held on. Rubio won the participation award, as Josh was alluding to. Hillary Clinton, she won the state she was expected to. The only one that was close that maybe is important is Massachusetts, but Sanders just didn't gain enough momentum to really look like a serious candidate. And now
Oklahoma was a big win for him too. Oklahoma was. No, of course. I mean, he always said he would win Oklahoma, which was a risk because that set the expectation. So now that he won it, everyone's like, well, it was expected, but it really wasn't. Like Oklahoma was really iffy, and that was kind of it's an interesting demographic because they're different than the other sort of white voters that Bernie gets, but they're still white voters, and that is that problem.
But what I would argue with that then is that because Clinton won more states, the average voter will see that she came out on top on Super Tuesday, and they're going to join the winning team, unfortunately. And she did, of course. So with that, Sanders will now kind of slip out of the picture because he's going to struggle to make himself look like the early winner that he was in some of the early primaries.
Yeah, he kind of went anti-Rubio there, where he actually won the states that he said he would win, except maybe Massachusetts, where he more or less tied. Rubio said he'd win 4 states and barely eked out a win in 1 in true Rubio fashion. What were you going to say, Peter?
Oh, I think we're seeing the results now of the lack of 50-state strategy that Bernie Sanders had. Hillary, for all her strengths, one of the most impressive ones is that from the beginning, she had a strategy to win every state, and she had a persona for every state. She was the blackest person in South Carolina for a week. She had, she was eating lobster rolls, and and talking the car in Massachusetts. I mean, the woman is impressive in her ability to switch her line from place to place. Bernie never really had that kind of a strategy. He was a one-message candidate. The only time he actually turned against Hillary was on the Wall Street issue, really, where it fit with his single strategy of economic inequality. Again, I suspect if we were to waterboard Bernie, and under either a Hillary or a Trump administration, he may, he would confess that he never really expected to get this far, and he didn't have a strategy for this far, because he expected to get crushed early on. He didn't, but I'm afraid now the Clinton machine is on a roll, and he'll just kind of fade away.
Let's not forget too that Hillary Clinton had the email drama get dropped right before Super Tuesday, and that didn't even dent it at all.
Before every election, she's had something about the emails drop. First, it was the confirmation of the investigation.
Who did she piss off on the internet? Somebody wants her. Somebody does.
Well, here's the thing. I actually would not be surprised if that didn't happen at her insistence, because again, I know it's almost a smart play to think that every time Hillary Clinton's lips are moving, the truth is not passing them. But I absolutely believe that she is sincere in her belief that the email scandal is no big deal. And so I wouldn't be surprised if, with the sole exception of the Justice Department thing, that she did want her stuff out there. Now, that is to say that what she wanted out there is stuff she wanted out there. You know, the stuff that's retroactively classified, the things that are problematic, weren't going to be released to the public anyway. So I think that was sort of a smart play. I saw you shaking your head, Peter, so give me a 1-2 response to that.
The only appropriate response to Hillary, and perhaps you with respect, is bullshit. Look, she got caught red-handed in March, and we can, if we had a couple of hours, we could walk through the many permutations of excuses that she's used since March to try to put this aside. But the reality is she got caught, and she doesn't have a whole lot to defend herself with except made-up crap, like it was all retroactively classified or it was unmarked. Or the various things that she's claimed, none of which are particularly true or accurate. And we can go into the details if people care to, having labored under both the government classification system and the State Department in particular for 24 years. Maybe I have something to add there. But the reality is Hillary knows that she's befuddled the American public, and she's confused the media enough, the ones who weren't already kind of on her side, that she just has to try to ride this out. The only thing that stands between her and the nomination, if not the presidency, is a formal indictment. And if anybody thinks that a African-American woman attorney general appointed by Barack Obama is going to personally torpedo Hillary Clinton's campaign, well, no, that won't happen. Let me just make that clear.
Well, what were you going to say about the State Department classification system? I want to hear that.
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, the idea that something is classified is based on the information itself. Whether, the idea is all these documents inside the government have markings on them. In fact, in the State Department, everything has a marking, including something that says unclassified. Typically, they say sensitive but unclassified. Everything does. I mean, if you were in the cubicle next to me and I sent you an email saying, Igor, you want to have lunch, it would be labeled sensitive but unclassified. Everything has a marking. When you're in Hillary's private server and people are retyping information, it was just something this week where the intelligence agencies have said that stuff was in there word for word from their documents, it stays classified. I mean, unless I want to admit I'm committing a criminal act by retyping a secret document into an unclassified system and adding the marker secret, even her people are not that dumb, it is still classified information. This retroactive stuff that Hillary likes to talk about is largely I think the better word would be restored classification, something that started life as say, a secret document, was retyped into her system and thus, in her mind, became unclassified. And now, before it's released to the public, the legitimate classification was restored. Second, Hillary knows, as well as anybody else, that the government, in fact, is allowed to retroactively classify information. And it's a very odd little quirk of the law, but it actually applies backwards. There was a very famous case of a TSA whistleblower named John Kiriakou, who, I'm sorry, I take that back, Robert McLean. Robert McLean blew the whistle on some TSA stuff by sending some unclassified information to a reporter. TSA didn't like that. They had the information retroactively classified and then went back and prosecuted him for releasing the classified information. And this case went all the way to the Supreme Court, where this concept of retroactive classification was upheld. So there are all sorts of things that Hillary has befuddled the media in a world where everything has to be in an 8-second soundbite. You can't get this kind of complexity across, especially when there's some Hillary stooge who comes on next and says, well, that's not true. The FBI knows how these rules work. The Justice Department knows how these rules work. But ultimately, we're going to see a political decision, and that is I cannot imagine Loretta Lynch is going to torpedo the Clinton candidacy. It just couldn't happen in the world that I know of. John, the State Department spokesperson, for example, today just kind of hinted at all this by saying that the State Department's own internal investigations, which are focusing on collaboration between Hillary's State Department and the Clinton Foundation, may not be completed by the time of the election. And he reiterated that they don't work on a political schedule. The investigation will take as long as it takes. So I think she's going to get away with it.
Well, it's all about perception, and Trump, yesterday and a few times that he's mentioned Hillary has alluded to the potential indictment. Yesterday said he's not even sure she's allowed to run. Josh, how much can this actually hurt her in the general election when Trump pretty much seems intent on just going for that one issue?
I think much at all, and to sort of retroactively amend my comments from earlier, all I was really talking about is perception with the voters. I mean, unless you
I understand.
Yeah, unless you are, really. I mean, I don't think that that's an issue that people who don't already hate Hillary Clinton give much of a fuck about classified information.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the classified sort of dust-ups we have, you got Edward Snowden, who you have a weird sort of bipartisan coalition of like libertarians and people on the left, and then like neocons and Democratic hawks who are on opposite sides of that. You had General Petraeus, who, people on the right were more likely to be like, who cares? You have Chelsea Manning, where people on the left are like, oh, she's a hero, and people on the right are like, said she deserves to be in jail. So I don't think this is going to hurt Hillary much. And I think that the perception is, with this stuff, like with the emails being released and A.G. Lynch giving an interview to Fox News, of all people, the day before Super Tuesday, I think that this is creating the perception that she is being absolutely forthright and and that she does not think it's a big deal. And I think that to be the kind of politician Clinton and Trump and people are, you have to be a little self-delusional. So I think she really believes it's not a big deal. So I honestly think that with everything working now the way that it should be, she's getting all the delegates, she's winning more contests, she's back to her, Republican, attack general election narrative. I think that she is going to, through her expertise in how these races are covered, and with such a shit show on the Republican side, she is probably going to just coast to the nomination unless Bernie Sanders drastically changes his message in such a way that it becomes new and worth looking at again.
Well, look, Super Tuesday was supposed to be a blowout for Hillary. I mean, there was some polls that suggested she might even win 10 out of the 11 states, with only Vermont going to Sanders. And Sanders did pull out big wins in Oklahoma. He won the 2 caucuses. So she won 7, he won 4. It's not exactly a blowout. It's not great, but it's not like a whole bunch of South Carolinas in a row. Eric, does Bernie still have like some kind of an inkling of a chance where he might be able to do something once the race goes back up north?
I want to say that he does, but realistically, with the way that the momentum is facing, it's Clinton's campaign at this point. Unless she goes full Trump and just starts like being as hateful as possible, she's going to lock down the Democratic nomination. I could address the situation more.
I think. Oh, good. I get to defend Bernie for once. I think you're wrong, Eric. Because first of all, Democrats proportional delegates the whole way through. Bernie has enough money. There's no other challengers.
Helps him because no matter what, it's never going to be like that drastic of a difference.
Well, yeah, but either way, he's going to have a significant chunk of the delegates. And remember, I feel like that once we get to the conventions, it's going to be about beating Trump or Cruz, because it looks like that's who it's going to be, Trump or Cruz. And either one, it's like asking if you want to stick your hand in a blast furnace or underneath a lawnmower. So I feel like once they get to the convention, if Bernie has a sizable enough delegates and a still passionate enough supporter base, Hillary Clinton will have no other choice but to pick him, or maybe someone, if she can't abide making him the VP, which would be silly not to do, someone like Elizabeth Warren or someone like that. Those super progressive, a double woman ticket. Yeah, I think those are.
Argue though, Josh, if I can interject for a second.
Please do.
There's about as much chance of Hillary picking Bernie as VP as she has of picking me. The idea is that Hillary's cabinet, including her vice president, have to be lesser people than Hillary. This is how she runs her world.
Yeah, but Peter, everybody is lesser than Hillary in Hillary's eyes. Come on. I mean,
it's easy to.
Who would she call a peer other than Kissinger?
Well, yeah, it's her mentor. But, the idea would be that she doesn't want anyone in her administration that's ideologically challenging or devil's advocate or anything else like that. So Bernie's never going to be her VP. I suspect Bernie's going to be a loyal soldier. He's been that way throughout this campaign. I mean, he hasn't really attacked her. He's made a couple of feints with the Wall Street stuff, but he's never really followed through on it. He threw the email issue away in the very first debate.
He's never attacked her on civil rights or any sort of black issues, which is a huge mistake. And again, you've got to love the guy for trying to keep the high ground and do it respectfully, but that has allowed Clinton to, go into the hood and meet with all the people who she and Bill have met with before, and they love that because they come in here and she's like, I'm here to see you. Bernie comes and tells you the same thing he tells everybody else. And on a rational level, yeah, that's not a good way to pick a candidate, but people like to feel a connection to their candidate.
Sure.
Hillary, it's amazing to me that I'm about to say this sentence, but Hillary is the candidate who is better able to make these human moments on the campaign trail. I mean, she is like a Romney bot, for the Democratic model as she was in 2008. But now, she's hugging the little girl who's scared her parents are going to be deported and just having all these other little things.
I can feel the thunder, though.
The software updates have definitely improved Hillary. There's no question about that. My earlier point was simply that the empathy patch. Yeah. Luckily, Apple hacked her on behalf of the FBI, so that one's done. No, I mean, my point is that Bernie has been and will be a good soldier, and he'll turn his delegates over, and he won't get much in return for that. I mean, it's maybe if he wants to be like Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare or some shit like that, maybe. But I don't think he'll even want that. I think he'll just
Secretary of Education would not be a small position for a guy like Bernie to get. I mean, Secretary of Education would be a cosign of him allowing to please do.
Yeah, so I forget to invite him to cabinet meetings and stuff like that. But
Peter, can you hear me?
No, I'm sorry, you dropped off.
There's a big delay between us. That's fine, because I was trying to say something before and you just randomly started speaking. What I was going to say before, Josh, before we went on the tangent, was that I don't think Bernie has a chance anymore because, number one, Clinton tends to have most of the delegates in her pocket, so that'll help her. And two, if you look at the states, at least from Super Tuesday, that Sanders lost, the margins were pretty large in all of them. The only one that was very close was Massachusetts. And then you could argue, obviously, Sanders killing her in Vermont was a given. Unless Sanders can...
But only 16 delegates in Vermont.
Right, but if Sanders can start making his losses be more graceful and close, then maybe he has a chance. But as long as he's getting slaughtered in these other states that he doesn't really have a chance in, it just gives voters the impression that his campaign's losing.
Well, it's really ironic that this whole race on both sides has been painted about anti-money in politics, and everyone talks about the influence of money in politics, and all of a sudden, you have Bernie Sanders, who's a fundraising machine all of a sudden. On NBC reported that he raised more money this week than Rubio raised in the entire month of January. Are we all of a sudden now discounting? Yeah, are we now discounting, how influential money can be in a 35-state race, which it is right now? Ironically, given the anti-money in politics candidate, Peter.
Well, as Bernie famously says, it's $27 at a time. So it's not so much the influence of money per se, it's the influence of a handful of individuals who have business before the government donating or through PACs making available extraordinary amounts of money.
Money does buy you a lot of advertising and reach into people's homes, though.
It does, and that's an issue separate from where my concern is, and I think where Bernie's concern is. The idea is that if I'm going to pay someone $200,000 to make a fact-free speech, look, you want something in return for that. It's just the way reality is. You cannot argue in any other direction. And the same thing with any of the other large donors coming out of Hollywood or whatever for the Clinton campaign. Trump is in a bizarre situation as this regards this. But, focusing on Hillary and Bernie, sure, money buys you TV advertising, it buys you computers and statistics and all that other stuff, and it makes you a viable candidate. Particularly when your opponent has lots of money. But I think that the edge that we're discussing, the important one, is buying influence, the people who are going to be owed something by Hillary Clinton if she wins the election and are going to come collecting.
No, the point I was trying to make was that he can afford to run a 35-state campaign. It just depends on how much he can actually win any of the other states by. And if he runs,
I actually think I got
200 more delegates. Go ahead, Josh.
I think Bernie is actually hurt by his own message in this regard, and what I mean by that is that across the whole sort of electoral field this year, everybody who spent the most money loses. Like, Bill, what's his name? Please clap. Jeb Bush. Thank you, Eric. Jeb Bush spent tens of millions of dollars to come in fifth. Ben Carson spent the most in a number of the states last night to come in dead last every single time. So Bernie having all that money and Bernie pushing, he doesn't have a PAC. Now that is sort of a big deal. Bernie doesn't have a PAC. But again, the people don't understand the difference between a PAC ad and a campaign ad, except the few who go, oh, the ones that don't say I approve this message are the PAC ads. People don't pay that close attention. And what I think that means is people aren't paying that close of attention to the ads. That's why I think Donald Trump is so dominant because, we got caught in this, I forget who it was. I think it was Matt Taibbi from Rolling Stone, who said that Trump's greatest move was in figuring out the circus of it all, how all the press attention would help him win, and because he's who he is, the press couldn't turn away even if it wanted to. And I think that's sort of the biggest lesson here is that...
Well, it's like a constant advertisement on TV, right, for him?
Right. Well, and it's about exposure. Like, if you can... The money thing, money was tied to who saw you and who saw your ads, who knew about your campaign. But when you are on all the news, and now with Twitter and Facebook being a bigger part of people's lives, the old political sort of machine with ads and mailers and push calls and things like that, it doesn't work anymore. I think people are finally, for better or worse, and in Bernie's case, this actually might be worse, they're getting past the idea of like, oh shit, they are trying to buy us, but we have the internet now, and I can be wrong at a whole different source.
Yeah, the resolution is being
Something that I found interesting the other day, though, is Donald Trump always talks about how he's funding his own campaign, but he actually loaned himself the money, and he's going to pay it back with the donations he received. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit.
Oh, he has 2
It's kind of the producers.
on his website, Was that Josh?
Well, there was I think I saw the same Daily Beast article that Eric saw, and he's essentially making money by running for president. It's kind of like that Jimmy Kimmel producer skit where, like, I'm going to run this awful campaign, pay myself, make a little profit, but oh shit, I'm winning. I don't know if that's really what it is or not, but that's kind of how it goes.
Let's talk about Trump. I think one of the most
himself his own plane.
Yeah, one of the most stunning things from last night was on CNN, on NBC, just Republican after Republican came on and just had this look like they just saw their dad get his ass kicked. They don't know what to do, and they were openly trying to plan how to prevent the guy getting all the primary delegates, all the votes, from actually getting the nomination. At one point, Tom DeLay, the former GOP leader, came on and was basically plotting to stop Trump from getting just enough delegates to seal the nomination so the party can then somehow do some voodoo in the second or third ballot of the convention and somehow force Marco Rubio down everyone's throat. First of all, it's a little wishful thinking, especially with winner-take-all primary starting up in a couple of weeks. And it's hard to envision Trump losing a lot of states. And second of all, we've talked about how it would be crazy for the Democrats to use a superdelegate system to prevent, the popular candidate from getting the nomination. This is basically the exact same scenario. Josh, with that said, we know that the Republicans, what would hurt the Republicans more, nominating Trump or staging a coup against their own voters?
I don't know. And I have to admit, this is my favorite thing about this whole election because, we who write about politics we veer towards hyperbole and embellishment sometimes when we talk about what is, the most important thing or the biggest revelation or the war for the soul of the Republican Party. That war actually started. It was a Cold War until Trump did the KKK thing. Yeah. And that's when people were like, holy fuck.
Right out. They're like, we don't want nothing to do with this.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's amazing to see because along with on TV there's the hashtag Never Trump, and it was started by a number of Republican columnists and former strategists. One of the big ones I remember is I think Rick Wilson. He's that bald gentleman, was on CNN a lot. I think he worked for Reagan because who didn't? Republicans of a certain age who didn't work for Reagan. But they were talking about, dark money and all types of crazy ideas to try to still get Cruz or Rubio elected with, delegates from the winner-take-all state. But the fact that they're actually talking about trying to broker the convention, and they very much are, is amazing. If it happens, if they try to have that brokered convention, it will be the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago, just on the Republican side, in Cleveland, and it'll be, if not the death of the Republican Party, it really will wound it in a way that I don't know if it could come back from on a national level.
Peter, what do you think that the Republican Party should worry more about? Is it Trump, or is it, fiddling around with what the voters want and preventing the frontrunner from getting the nomination?
They can worry about what they want, but the reality is there's a reason why Cruz and Rubio are not leading right now. I don't necessarily know what that reason is, but there is a reason. And so brokering a convention and pushing Trump aside in favor of a candidate who wasn't able to build popular support is pretty much a way of saying, congratulations, Madam President, because it's destroy, as Josh put it, destroy the Republican Party, certainly end the election that afternoon. Hillary just has to hide in a dark room until November and not get caught saying anything. The idea being that the Republicans had their opportunities with Trump maybe a while ago, and they never took him seriously. And now all of a sudden they're taking him seriously. They don't like what they're seeing. And it's like, yeah, well, guys, sorry that, the horse left the barn. All that said, I quietly, maybe this is just hope, quietly wonder how much of Trump is bullshit and how much is not. Once he's in the White House, assuming that's what happens, Jesus. Once he's in the White House, and he's got to make appointments, and the Republican Party is involved in figuring out who all the undersecretaries of state are going to be, and the minor appointments that the president goes nowhere near. They're going to own an awful lot of a Trump administration. The bureaucracy, if you will, has an enormous capacity for slow walking things, for getting things not done that can hold it up. Keep in mind that the Republicans will either hold Congress, in which case they can put up a firewall there against the stupidest of Trump stuff, or the Democrats will. And they're certainly not going to empower Trump in any way. So I suspect it will not be the Republican reality nightmare that they may worry about. But politically, I wholeheartedly agree with my colleague Josh that it is the Republicans have taken their stupid strategy to the pinnacle of it, and the pinnacle is named Donald Trump.
Well, the worry is that if Trump is nominated, then they won't hold Congress. I mean, that's really the biggest concern. But the logic or the excuse they would use, according to what they were saying last night, is that, well, if he doesn't reach the minimum necessary amount of delegates, that's a sign of weakness, and so we'll replace him with someone who got even less delegates. What are you going to say, Eric?
Well, I was going to chime in on this since I always seem to be the third wheel here. But when I look at the candidates, I see Ted Cruz, and he's actually...
Sorry, Dr. Carson.
It's okay. Bring some civility back to politics, please. Okay.
We should have a meeting, you're right.
When I look at Ted Cruz, he's a candidate that, if you were to go back to the start of this election cycle, is hated by his party. He's seen as somebody that's on the outside, a little too out there, and just somebody that the establishment Republicans would never touch. Trump enters the scene, of course. Ted Cruz looks a little more normal, which is weird, but I still see him as this batshit crazy person. Then you have Marco Rubio, who is just not a good candidate overall because he can't compete with the craziness that is Trump and Cruz. And now that he's trying, like in the recent weeks, has been going on the offensive, trying to like personally insult Trump and stuff. And it's just pathetic to watch, like the small hands thing, or what was the penis joke he made the other day. It's just sad.
That was it.
Yeah, but I love it actually because of the backstory on that, where Trump allegedly like circles pictures of his hands and sends it to that one editor. That's hilarious, and that's something I could see Trump doing. But watching Rubio try to like be the big boy and make these insults is just kind of sad. It's like the grade 9 trying to bully a grade 12 in high school. It just doesn't work very well. So that's how I see it. I see Trump as like, he's not more manly than the other candidates, but he knows how to play that angle. Cruz isn't good enough at getting involved in it, and Rubio's just too inexperienced to be able to stand tall in that kind of environment.
That's a really good point. The question is also, who would the party even try to get behind? Rubio has pretty much proven to be a dud, and now Lindsey Graham, for example, today said that maybe we'll have to rally around Ted Cruz, which is ironic because Lindsey Graham is also the guy who said that if you shot Ted Cruz dead on the Senate floor, no one would care and you'd get away with it. So this is the same guy that's now saying, well, this is a better alternative to Trump. Josh, is this a better alternative to Trump?
That's the thing. It's amazing to me that when we started out with 17 of these fuckers. And I say that with all due respect, because stepping up to serve your country is an honorable thing. But we start out with 17 of these fuckers. And we whittled down to the two worst options. This would have been like in 2012, getting Herman Cain and Michelle Bachmann as our two candidates.
That's a really interesting point, because in 2008, Newsmax wanted to host a debate, and they ended up having to cancel it because half the candidates dropped out because one of the moderators was going to be Donald Trump.
Yeah. But see, I don't know. I don't know which Like, because it seems like we're getting at which one is the worst one for the Republicans. I think Cruz. I think Cruz is the worst one. I mean, and I really struggled with this weekend, especially because of the racist shit. I mean, that's really bad. But like Peter said, there's a part of us that either hopes or thinks that Trump is just lying. Like, he's just putting on a show, and that if he did somehow find himself in the Oval Office, he would, comport himself in a way that is at least George W. Bushian.
I have a question. Does anybody remember
wow, I feel so much better now.
That's reassuring. Was that Eric?
I'm trying to ask, does anybody remember which issue it was about half a year ago that Cruz had a lot of opposition in the Senate over? It, like, they all were against him, and he wanted to keep calling a vote or something, and they basically pushed him out on it. I don't know. Anyways, that happened.
I feel like that was an Obamacare thing, wasn't it?
Or maybe a budget bill, maybe budget related. But anyways, it goes to show that, like, the Republicans absolutely hate Cruz. They don't want to work with him, but I guess when they see Trump, they feel like he's a better choice. But building on your point about Trump maybe lying to us all, I absolutely believe that's the case. I mean, if you look at his record before he joined the media circus that's going on in the current election, he was more or less just a business guy that made decisions that were beneficial to his business. He's supported the pro-choice, but yes, he has supported, obviously, pro-life in the past. He dances on the issues, but I don't think for a second that he wants to, like, kill all immigrants in America, to kill all black people with the KKK. Like, I don't buy into that. I think he does want to build a wall. He absolutely wants to build a wall, because that's the kind of government contract program that they could make a shit ton of money on. That's right, but I mean, whether or not he built this wall, who cares? I think that he's just saying this stuff to get media exposure, to lock down the conservative base, and then I think he's going to try to pivot and try to land some of Sanders' supporters if he falls out of the race, because they're going to be pissed, and who knows if they're all just going to flock to Clinton. Because a lot of people do see a lot of similarities between Trump and Sanders. Well, certain things are very different on, but that idea of anger, and if he can capitalize on that, a lot of bitter Sanders people might jump ship.
Yeah, the only problem with the Sanders people is they don't fucking show up to the polls, as we've seen.
Yeah, and that is why. Well, here, and that's the thing. Like, the one thing I remember from my college poli-sci classes is that the greatest motivation to get people out to the polls is not an inspiring message and a sense of civic duty and hope for the future. It's, I really fucking hate the other guy. So, if bitter Sanders supporters did jump to Trump, they would probably come out and vote for him, which is why I think that Hillary has to make a direct appeal by either nominating Sanders as the VP or someone like Elizabeth Warren. Again, Sanders does seem sort of unlikely, given how Hillary how Clintons tend to hold grudges with campaignings. But, if she had the balls to do her and Elizabeth Warren, which is maybe why Elizabeth Warren hasn't endorsed anybody.
Balls, Josh.
Huh?
It would be the vagina. They don't have balls.
No, well, the ovaries then.
Hillary.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Together.
Exactly. If Hillary Clinton
right now, the feminists goes really outraged
with a double lady ticket, that would be the ballsiest move in politics of all times, and I don't think a bad one. So I think that's the appeal she has to make, or she does risk losing people to Sanders. So I agree with Eric on that.
Yeah, but Hillary doesn't.
Christie, I think, at least for now.
But then the United States was running out of donuts, so I'm not sure if that's a good pick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you really think that Chris Christie has a chance to be the vice president, though, for Trump? Peter?
No, Trump. I don't know. No, this is part of the solution here for Trump and the Republicans is he's going to find a mainstream Republican as his VP. And that will hopefully shut up some portion of the traditional Republican Party, make them, that person will help keep him in line. It'll appeal to a lot more Republican voters and maybe some of the undecideds who are a little terrified of Donald Trump. And if he is running against Hillary Clinton and he picks somebody like Nikki Haley or another woman, then he's got a chance at a big chunk of the female voter pulling it away.
Peter, did you not see he went on like a tweet storm about Nikki Haley this weekend?
Well, yeah, but
I mean, he's never going to pick her.
I don't believe anything.
He's going to. You're right, though. He will pick a governor. I think it's Christie because Christie came out at a time when he needed to switch up the narrative because KKK was coming down the path, and so I think he will go with Chris Christie or maybe some other sort of governor, but it will be someone who has sort of like a mainstream Republican experience feel to balance out where he's weak. And then if it's Christie, Donald Trump can totally switch himself up into being this compassionate, soft-spoken kind of presidential dude, and Christie will be the attack dog, and Trump will feed him his best lines.
Trump, soft-spoken.
Yeah,
Did you just put those two in the same sentence?
Well, I don't mean soft-spoken, that's true. But, I mean, he will be, like, reserved. I mean, you know how he gets when he gets as close as he can to apologizing for something. You know, when he talks seriously. like his Iowa speech. His Iowa speech is what we would get on the general.
One of the things you want from a vice president, in addition to balance, is you want someone who's going to bring some votes along with him or her. I mean, Christie is not entirely well liked in New Jersey, and Jersey is not a place with a lot of delegates of its own. Trump is going to pick somebody from a state that he needs to carry, that has some votes, and doesn't have all the baggage.
Kasich is the other option, and some people say Kasich is staying in to take away from the other guys, so that.
Yep. Kasich's certainly going to take those Ohio votes with him and bargain those away for something. Again, it could be a lesser spot in whoever's administration it is. It could be some prize to be named later. But I mean, Kasich knows that he's going to be able to probably take Ohio, or certainly a lot of votes in Ohio, and he'll bargain that away. But I think Trump will pick some. I don't know any other women Republicans, but I'm sure there's some out there, and he'll pick one, and that way she can say anything she wants against Hillary, and Hillary will not be able to do the sexism thing. It'll take a lot of steam out of Hillary's proclamations about being the first woman president. Mitigate that.
If the Republicans pick a woman again to run, like, because of Hillary, then no one learned any lessons from 2008, and this is my favorite election ever.
Of all the things Sarah Palin is, I mean, woman comes way down the list. Psychopath is number one. And, you know, I mean, she was a woman, but that's not really what matters in her case. I mean, she was completely insane and had an insane family and an insane narrative and brought absolutely nothing of value to the McCain campaign other than to turn it into a punchline. So, I mean, hopefully Trump will find something
good did
better
come out of
than
Sarah
that.
Palin. She rejuvenated Tina Fey's career. That's good.
She did. And we're all glad for that. And
guess who she gave us? Ted Cruz. She gave us Ted Cruz, so that was nice. Thanks, Sarah.
The Republicans have bitten their own dick. I mean, they have spent all these years fanning the flames of angry white people. They have spent all these years courting the extremists, the Second Amendment extremists, the anti-everything extremists. And hey, it's now come home to roost. Don't forget, Peter, they established that, you know, basically all media is liberally biased and is lying to you because they hate America and want to turn everyone gay, which is why you've seen the electorate turn against Fox News when they were like, listen, about this Trump character, they were like, fuck you liberals. You know, so I think that plays as much of a big role too. Yep.
Yeah,
so,
I have a question
the Republicans
for you,
have only themselves to blame. Sorry.
Do you think we'll see the withdrawal of the Tea Party movement, like not actually gone, but do you think we'll see it less as a focal point for mainstream Republicans now? Or are they going to try to back away from that extremism and bring it back more towards the middle?
Well, they have tried that already. I mean, they've been trying to run against the crazy Tea Partiers for years now, and Eric Cantor lost, his seat to some right winger, and Chris Kobach just won governor of Kentucky. It hasn't really stopped. They're the ones that are trying to stop it more than Democrats.
The Tea Party was smart because they made a lot of noise in the beginning, but then they focused on local elections, and now they control states. I mean, they're small in Congress, but they control a bunch of states.
One of the other ironic things, like Peter was talking about how the Republican Party basically bred this whole movement, is the way that the Republican primaries are set up now were set up to prevent, like last time when Mitt Romney, who was already going to be the nominee right from the beginning, had to battle like Newt Gingrich and all these schlubs for like months. So they vastly shortened the primary schedule, and now I think the convention's a month earlier. And so they basically don't have any time to stop this. Yeah, well, all right. So Ben Carson looks like he's dropping out. He said he's not going to come to tomorrow night's Fox News debate. He said there's no political path forward. And just yesterday, he was saying, I'm not dropping out. Josh, what the hell is this man thinking? And why did he stay this long if he wasn't intending to stick it out to the end?
Well, I think he did. I think his camp made that common mistake in politics where they say the thing that's true, but you're not supposed to say out loud. So yesterday they said that they would stay in as long as they kept raising money, and that has always been Ben Carson's strength, is that his campaign, under the guidance of his business manager and media personality, Armstrong Williams, is run like a direct mail fundraising sort of organization. So, I mean, he was able to drop $800,000 in one state. I think it was Vermont. He has that kind of money to throw around. Why he came out today and has said that he's not going to the debate, maybe he's just tired of the debates. I don't know. Because, again, he didn't say he's suspending his campaign. He just said, I'm not going to the debate.
He said
I think he's going to keep raising money.
On Friday, he's going to give a speech at CPAC, and he's probably going to drop out.
Okay.
Anyway,
But then in that case, money is why he stayed in.
Yeah, but that buys him a place at the table if he wants it. You know, when he comes time to turn over the money, turn over the staff. I don't know if he has any delegates, but I mean, you know, he has a place at the table. He's probably the last African American in the Republican Party, and so they always like him around for some, photo ops when they have to make it look nice.
Black guy.
So he'll have his place.
He's actually the most popular. I mean, as far as favorable ratings go, he has by far the highest favorables out of all these guys. Even Kasich, who just plays a nice guy everywhere
the whole time. Yeah.
Well, he seems like a lovely gentleman. Like, I'd love to eat dinner with him. I just don't want him to be in the Situation Room. Because he thinks the pyramids have fucked them.
Or grain silos.
That's hilarious, but I don't want my president to think that.
It's so reassuring. I would love to see him as spokesperson for a Republican White House. He's just so calming.
I would love to see him as the head of the RNC. Oh my God, would that make me so happy if he took Reince Priebus's job.
The North Koreans have dropped a nuclear weapon on Japan, so I know this is going to be a little bit difficult for some of us, but we're going to do our. I mean, it's just so reassuring. I loved when he had his chance on the debates. I just, like, my cortisol levels just sunk down, and I had that kind of, when you take that first shot of whiskey and it kind of warms all the way down.
All right, well, the other one is Marco Rubio. It doesn't look like his campaign's going anywhere, and right now in Florida, he thinks he can win, but the polls suggest that he's down by like 20 points. Josh, Rubio's a
here's what. Oh, yeah. He has been. And here's the thing. On paper, he is like Hispanic young Mitt Romney without the business career. He's just, he looks like a candidate. He's got the right kind of middling positions that you can go right for the primary and then left for the general,
but I mean, this is a guy,
more to the center.
Right, but this is a guy who's young, who still has a political future. He risks being destroyed in his home state. Doesn't that kind of undercut any chances for the next time around?
Oh, yeah. He made a huge mistake. I mean, it's funny because Jeb Bush was right. He made a huge mistake in trying to do this now, trying to sort of be the GOP version of Obama, but you can't blame him because, again, on paper, Latino, we're doing Latino outreach. He was part of the immigration reform bill. It made perfect sense. In a Trumpless race, I still think he would have done way better than we would have thought. But then Trump came in and ruined everything. And here's the thing: if he wins Florida, that's good. And then he's going to need to. Well, I'm just saying, if he did, he would then have to run. Like, he'd have to win every single successive election. Like, he would have to run the table. And that's not going to happen. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I don't see why Rubio doesn't try to, drop out in favor of Kasich. Again, if they're doing this party unity rally around the guy who's not crazy, it's Kasich or Cruz as the only options for beating Trump.
Last night seems to suggest that if Cruz were to drop out, which obviously he won't, his supporters are likely to go to Trump, whereas if Rubio dropped out, his supporters are more likely to go to Cruz. Peter,
yes.
Do you think that Rubio drops out if he gets crushed in Florida, or do you think he's the guy who's going to stay in this, play spoiler, and see if the Republican Party is going to try to screw over its voters in the convention?
I think he's very stubborn. I think, as I think it was Josh pointing out, I mean, he thinks he should be a better candidate than he is. And I think he probably to himself is blaming external forces, Donald Trump in this particular case. I think also he wants to kind of hang around to see if there's going to be a revolt in the Republican Party so that he can step in. If he loses in Florida, his chances of getting reelected in the Senate become an open question at that point. And so he may want to stick around to see if he's got enough cards to play to get a new job if the Republicans win in November. But most of all, I think it's kind of a – what's that?
I was saying he already talked shit about the Senate, though, saying he didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, well, that's what you say when you think you're going to lose. I think, though, overall – it's just an ego thing. He really thought this was going to be his chance, that he was just going to have to out-nice Ted Cruz and put himself just a little bit to the left of the crazies, and he was going to sweep through the primaries. But it wasn't that year for that.
And this is one of the few times I think you can legitimately blame the media for something, because guys like, people like me who say that Rubio should be the guy on paper are saying that on TV, he's hearing that, and so that's like in not just it's obviously not in any voters' heads, but it's in his head, and he thinks that, yeah, I'm the guy. So he's staying in is absolutely ego, and that ego's being fed by the people on TV talking about openly handing him the nomination in spite of what the voters say. So it's just about how this party has completely broken down.
The Republican Party, because up until a week ago, Jeb Bush still thought he had a chance to somehow finagle the nomination for himself. I mean, what the Republicans were seeing with this race is completely different than the way it's gone, the way it's going to go. And even right now, they're still in denial.
Yeah, well, I mean, Bush was delusional. I mean, he was being bullied by his family. I mean, I don't think it's fair to pick on him, but I think
he was an overwhelming front runner for a good year before the race really started going.
Right. But I suspect a lot of that was media narrative, because the appeal of a Bush-Clinton showdown was very, very interesting to the media.
Nostalgia is very hot right now.
It's a trend. With Rubio, it may be something as simple as the Republican Party people pulling him aside and saying, kid, it's not your election. Tonight is not your night. And for the good of the party and to preserve yourself as a future something, it's time to let it go this time. I don't know.
I was thinking more of the Joe Pesci scene from Goodfellas when they were going to make him a made guy. I was thinking that's more how it would go, but.
That could happen too, but I'm a big on the wall.
No.
All right, let's end it on that note. We're going to check back in Friday. Tomorrow's the Fox News debate. We'll talk about that. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for reading Latest.com.